Well, Thomas Aquinas, the greatest doctor of the church, the universal common doctor of the church, died 750 years ago on this day. Parish, orphans, and retrogrades, 3/4 of 1 millennium ago. And the crazy thing is he's still closer to us slightly than to Augustine. Joining me today to discuss some of the what ifs is Dr. Edmund Mazza. Ed, how are you doing today? You've been on the show, especially a lot lately, and we enjoy having you back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, I mean, look, the common doctor of the church, the doctor of doctors of the Roman Catholic Church, and just probably all-time smarty pants, to use an official term. All-time smarty pants. Maybe that goes in terms of creative ideation to Aristotle, but in terms of pure under the hood horsepower, processing speed, you got to give it to Aquinas, even a little like a nose over Aristotle. If Aquinas were alive today, he would say, to borrow an old joke from UHF, help, help, let me out of the box, let me out of the box. Aside from that, he is a preacher of fidelity to Mother Church and to Father Papa. Of course, how would he contextualize the seeming almost formalized apostasy of Mother Church and Papa of the church today? I'll let you spin with that, Ed.
Yeah, well, I think that the best thing would be for me to read a short paragraph from Aeterni Patris, which, as you and some of the parish orphans may remember, in 1879, Pope Leo XIII issued an encyclical on restoring Christian philosophy, and it really gave an impetus to restore the study of St. Thomas. And out of that, we get Garrigou-Lagrange and later Jacques Maritain and Gilles Sonne and these guys. But to answer, the prompt that you kind of threw my way, let me just pull up here and read this. This is section 18 of his encyclical. The angelic doctor pushed his philosophical inquiry into the reasons and principles of things, which, because they are most comprehensive and contain in their bosom, so to say, the seeds of almost infinite truths, were to be unfolded in good time by later masters and with a goodly yield. And as he also used this philosophic method in the refutation of error, he won this title to distinction for himself, that, single-handed, he victoriously combated the errors of former times and supplied invincible arms to put those to rout which might in after times spring up. So I don't know if you want to get into some of the errors of his time and some of the errors of our own time, which on both occasions, according to Pope Leo, he provides us, the angelic doctor provides us with invincible arms against them.
Yeah, I mean, we can just kind of race through listing the errors of the 13th and 14th century church. And then I think people are well acquainted with the errors of our day. They're mostly in the simplest area of theology, which I think would especially confound and astound Aquinas. The simplest area of theology is moral theology. It's very straightforward, and it has to be because all people are accountable for getting moral theology right, at least as a praxeology. They at least have to live out the answers to moral theology. That means it has to be easy enough for the lowest common denominator, which is very low. And it has to be something that can be processed by the processing speed of the unwashed masses. So this idea of complex moral question, which has been used over the last 100 years in the church to usher in a day of relativism and anti-natural law sexual ethics, which is really all it's ever used for, is sex ethics. But Pope Francis doesn't want to make murder okay or bank robbery okay or anything like that. It's just sex ethics, where people put their private parts, what they do with them. Pope Francis and lots of renegades in the middle half of the 20th century church have labored arduously toward changing. So Aquinas would just be astounded. I don't know what he'd say. He might puke or something like that, as one of our commenters said. But it's so easily proven wrong. I mean, like Pope Francis said on February the 18th, 2016, you can use condoms in some cases. Well, that's just wrong. He'd just be like, do I even need to start a proof? Like Francis isn't even trying to prove that it's not. You can give communion to unrepentant adulterers. They don't need to go to confession first. You can bless SS unions. We'll just call it that for this whole show.
Well, one of the first things in that context we should throw out to the listeners is that St. Thomas and other great saints teach this. In order to have moral clarity or to have intellectual clarity, you have to be pure. You have to be of the pure-hearted. And this is where Aquinas even has a leg up on Augustine. Augustine in his Confessions tells us about the sins of the flesh that he had gotten into in his youth. But there's the famous story of the fact that when he was a teenager and he wanted to join the Dominicans, his noble family locked him in the family castle. And in order to dissuade him from his vocation, they introduced a prostitute who, was not going to use physical violence against him, but was going to use that power that women have against men. And it's interesting from just in many different perspectives. He engaged in self-defense. He took a red hot iron poker from the fireplace and literally drove her out at the point of a weapon. So, because the salvation of one's soul is even more important than the defense of one's body. But anyway,
Right.
the point is that from that point forward, God gave him a special grace where he was never again tempted in that particular below, as Bergoglio would say, below the belt issue. From the get-go, that we have to say that the Bergoglian henchmen like Tuccio or Touch Me, depending on how you want to pronounce his name, they don't
Heal
have.
me with your touch, Fernandez.
That's right. Goodness gracious, they don't have. They don't understand the faith, or imagine being appointed the head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. How are you going to have clarity on the faith when your mind is perverted by sexual impurity? But that'd be the first thing that comes to mind, giving a Thomistic assessment of the current situation. But as you point out, these people don't start with the right premises. Therefore, they don't reach the right conclusions. And you're more equipped to speak on those particular philosophical starting points than I am. But as I say, there were particular errors that Thomas combated in his own century, and then there are particular errors that we have in theology today, particularly in the post-Vatican II Church, which he would be in a good position to give us invincible weapons to use against the modernist.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's excellently stated. Yeah, the ambiguities, so-called, of Vatican II and the pluralism, that would probably be, I would say, the main issue, the main nit he would pick in today's church, besides the sex ethics, which I think he would just be like, really? Seriously? The sex ethics are so clear. They're not even just supernatural law specific to Jesus and Christian teaching. They're natural law. But most Hesiod and Homer would get most of this. But in addition to that would be the pluralism, the idea of Christians really being able to live in the world in polities, effective polities with Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and Hindu, and like the temptation when you live politically with all these other factions to start saying, no, you guys are really good enough, and all the difficulties that have arisen from Dignitatis Humanae and Nostra Aetate, even if they don't contain errors, which I don't think they do. But
Well, that's that's the funny thing. Tim, I'm actually offering a course that just started last night, and if folks are interested, if they email me, I'll send them the first class, excuse me, for free. edmundmazza@gmail.com. Actually, and if they anyway, we're going to be getting into the fact that Thomas wrote one of his great works, the Summa Contra Gentiles, specifically for intellectual Muslims and Jews who don't accept the authenticity of the New Testament. And he did this at the request of the guy I did my doctoral dissertation on, St. Raymond of Peñafort, who was one of the successors of St. Dominic,
yep,
and who was engaged in Spain and North Africa in training his friars in Arabic and Hebrew in order to be able to intellectually debate Jews and Muslims and to bring them into the faith, which is quite different from Bergoglio's proselytism is solemn nonsense, and you must never try to convert. You must
convince
never
another of your
convince.
yeah, it's a mortal sin to convince another of your faith, like direct quote, a mortal sin against ecumenism or something like that.
So Thomas Aquinas was, not some monk in a cloistered convent who never, knew about the existence of non-Catholics, right? He lived at a particular hour in history when the Christian world was engaging and being engaged with the non-Catholic world in particular. So I'm going to be getting into this in my course, St. Thomas Aquinas, his wisdom and his world. It's a 12-week course. If folks go to edmundmazza.com, they can enroll in that. And if they email me at edmundmazza@gmail.com, I'll send them the first video for free. But yeah, this notion that only with Vatican II did the church start to dialogue with the other is just complete nonsense. Because, as I say, the Dominicans in particular, and of course, St. Dominic only founded the order just a few decades before Aquinas joined it. They were already engaging and converting and convincing Jews and Muslims to become Catholics.